Hi, good evening everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Abby, your off-screen moderator, and I'm going to turn it over to our panelists right now to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll move forward with the question and answer portion. So if you want to get started, Sarah.
Great. My name is Sarah Hakimzadeh. I'm a 7th year PhD student in the English department.
Hi guys, I'm Beth Shaban. I'm a 5th year PhD student in the epidemiology department at Pitt Public Health.
Hello everyone, I'm Rahul Amurthapuri, a 2nd year doctoral student in Behavioral and Community Health Sciences at the Graduate School of Public Health.
Hello, I'm Robin Sowards. I work here at the United Steelworkers in the organizing department and the collective bargaining department. I did my doctoral work at Cornell.
Great. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about academic labor in general and also working in the English department at Pitt and some of the issues that affect us. So first, what's happening at universities across the country? So first thing, most obviously, tuition is going up for undergraduates. Universities are prioritizing profitable research, and more graduate workers are employed in universities each year. So as an example, in 1940, the University of Wisconsin employed 665 graduate assistants in teaching and research. In 1948, there were 1,400. By 1971, there were 3,000, and today there are over 5,300 graduate assistants working at the University of Wisconsin. So there's also been a shift from tenure or tenure track educators to contingent cheap labor, which includes us, so grad student workers and adjuncts too. At the University of Pittsburgh, there are some trends. So every year enrollments are going up and entering classes get larger and larger. When our chancellor was first appointed, he sent out a memo talking to faculty about commercializing research. So for me, as a grad student worker in the English department, I ask what that means for the English department. Next, we are grad students, but we're also workers, and the university relies on us to perform essential teaching and administrative tasks. So this is very important. And nationwide, grad student workers have been unionizing to ensure that the protections that we have are still in place. So a few examples, grad student workers at the University of Missouri lost their health insurance and were told that there would be conditions attached to tuition waivers, for example, the number of hours taught. At the University of Chicago, health insurance fees went up by 12% each year. At the University of Connecticut, PhD students were subject to $120 in extra fees per year to build a new exercise center on campus. So these are just a few examples. So what is a grad student worker? More than a benevolent recipient of a grant for academic excellence, a grad student worker is a student and a worker entitled to fair working conditions, including transparent employment policies. So fair working conditions means that we can bargain for a fair contract collectively, we protect what we already have, and we seek to improve our working conditions. What might this include? The number of assigned students in a class is reasonable, workspace to meet with students and write. We have it. Benefits are fair and secure. There are fee waivers when necessary, annual salary increases. Vacation time, especially for students in the sciences, is determined in advance and guaranteed, and we have paternity and maternity leave. And what happens when the contract is breached? We have a grievance procedure with representatives of our own choosing to address our concerns. So why a grad workers union? More autonomy in determining our working conditions. The union will be a democratic organization and will determine what's in our contract. And also to be part of a broader movement for workers' rights and economic equality in order to reverse the structural and cultural trends that undermine them, which I talked about in the beginning. For the humanities in particular, it's important to note that academic labor doesn't really function as a market. So they tell us that academia functions as a market. There are tenure track jobs in demand, and the degree holders are the supply. And this makes administrators think and speak about grad education on the one hand and grad labor on the other. But the reality is actually a two-tiered workforce in the university system. So there's tenured faculty on the one hand and contingent labor, which includes us grad workers and adjuncts on the other. So this reality is very bad. Particularly in English departments, degree holders are less able to sell their labor than non-degree holders. So we grad workers teach writing classes in the English department, lower level lit classes, upper division classes in our specialty. Then after 5 to 7 years of experience, we're out. We become adjuncts, which means that we work for low wages with little to no job security and have very little say over the terms of our employment. OMETs, which are evaluations, are important in whether employment continues. And if you teach controversial or difficult material, then good luck. Alternatively, we're told that we can look for alternative careers. And the question with that is how well prepared we actually are to take those on. I would underscore that institutions want to conserve labor costs by casualizing faculty positions, and we aren't the only ones who lose. So a lot of teaching, including in the English department, is done by people who have between 0 and 4 years of experience. Cheap teaching holds down salaries of professors, and professor salaries have stagnated since 1970. Their associate professors teach more, serve more, and publish more in return for lower compensation than any previous generation of faculty. So what's the solution? First, awareness that labor is becoming more contingent nationally and globally, from the university to the sweatshop. And it's also important to engage in struggles with employers over conditions in the workplace and to build solidarity with workers outside the university.
Thanks, Sarah. So bear with me as I get up some slides from a PowerPoint presentation, and these are just going to be a modified version of those slides. So I want to give you some, let's see if I can get this Wi-Fi to stop trying to connect. Okay, I want to actually give you some sort of cold hard facts that can help you understand what the issues on campus are as we organizing committee members go around on campus and talk to our colleagues, and then how other universities with unions, how they have been able to address those issues with what they have been able to achieve in their contracts. So first, I just want you to understand the institution comparison group that we've constructed. So these are institutions that are similar to Pitt, and so they meet the following 3 criteria. They're public sector, they're R1 universities, so they're sort of top flight in terms of how much research they do, and similarly the Association of American Universities, they're a member of that group, which is also for the top research universities. So using this standard, there are 34 institutions in the comparison class. And out of those 34, 18 are currently organized into a union, and that's 53% of the group. Another 8 are currently organizing to form unions, and so if all of them achieve those unions, that would put this union density at 76% of our comparison class. So don't let anybody make you think that this is some kind of strange or unheard of approach in academia. It's actually quite common. And I'd like to just put it out there to you that if you think the University of Michigan, SUNY Stony Brook, UC Berkeley, Irvine, and Davis are good schools, those are schools that have unions, and so we would be in good company if we join them and form our union. So now let's get into what do we hear on campus. First, we hear issues about transparency. Nobody knows who makes decisions about graduate worker funding, sexual harassment policies, benefit packages, intellectual property, workload. Do these policymakers actually have the same perspectives and interests as graduate student workers? I don't think so. Second, workplace democracy. Department policies are inherently responsive to staff needs and personnel changes, but they don't have to be responsive to the needs of grad workers. Grad workers at the University of Pittsburgh are here because we're the best and brightest. We're making invaluable contributions to Pitt's education and scientific research mission, but we don't have commensurate power over workplace rules and policies. Next, we hear a lot about wages. There is a wide variation in wages for different job classes across schools at the university, and this is common among other institutions because it allows for departments to address issues of recruiting people who might otherwise go into industry, and it also allows them to compete by attracting the best grad students. So that in and of itself is not problematic. However, grad workers in many departments across the university would like to see wages go up, and many grad workers are really not making a living wage. So what we want to do is set a floor beneath wages, not a cap, and we want to make sure that grad workers are able to leverage this collective work and all the labor that we provide to the university to achieve these goals. So out of the 18 schools with unions in our comparison class that we constructed, 18 out of 18 achieved pay raises in their contracts. Second is policies around sexual, gender, international, race, and class discrimination. The current channels of addressing these grievances are entirely controlled by the administration. They have a primary effort to protect the administration and not necessarily the grad workers that are here. They need to protect the institution. Student bodies currently have a limited non-binding input into these policies. And for example, Title IX cases, which deal with any gender-based discrimination, sexual harassment, sexual assault, are not publicized, and they allow repeat situations to occur. Victims are not able to share that information, and so new people who are considering coming into the university and working with that person, they have no idea that this person is a serial offender. So out of the 18 schools, 18 out of 18 have achieved anti-discrimination language written into their contract. Speaking a little more specifically about sexual harassment, there's an article from the Utah Law Review by Cantalupo and Kidder of 2017 that found 1 in 10 female grad students at major research universities have been sexually harassed. The new information that they found in this report was that this harassment was most likely to be physical, not verbal, and most of the harassment, 53% of cases, came from serial offenders. We need some system where we can fight back against this. So out of the 18 schools with unions, 14 out of 18 include provisions addressing sexual harassment. Regarding benefits, many people are happy about the health insurance that we have, and the issues though are varied. So mental health care availability, retention of qualified counselors by the university has been a problem. There are prohibitive costs for adding additional dependents like spouses and children. There's a lack of decision-making power over the continuation of current benefits and any potential changes. Like Sarah just mentioned, the University of Missouri losing their health insurance. What would happen if the university said that to us? We have no way to fight back. There are no clear leave policies at the university. And so out of the 18 schools with union, 18 of 18 addressed employer-provided health care and leave policies. Regarding mental health, this is a big issue in terms of the benefits that are provided to us. PhD students are 1.5 to 2.5 times more likely than other highly educated control groups to have depression, and that's just absolutely unacceptable. We hear information about workload across campus. This is like a clear unifying theme that I hear no matter where I talk to grad workers. Some grad workers don't even know how many hours they're contractually obligated to work. A clear unifying theme across all of this is time theft. So out of the 18 schools with unions, 18 of 18 address the issue of workload. Travel expenses and other expenses, the opportunity to attend conferences, for example, that's something that we need to further our careers. And so 13 out of 18 of our comparison class addressed the issues of travel and expenses in their contract. As Sarah mentioned, we want a formalized grievance procedure, and 17 out of 18 of the unionized schools have created a clear, consistent grievance procedure. In addition, we hear about childcare. It's not every student that just continues straight through school and doesn't have other obligations. Many of us have kids that we're taking care of. Currently, we have no way to get into the daycare center that is provided through the university. In fact, there's a 3-year waiting list. There's no financial assistance offered. And so this is something we can actually address through collective bargaining. So 11 out of the 18 schools have provisions for childcare. Another issue is workplace health and safety. And so we have experiences talking to grad workers in labs, for example, who are working with chemicals or machinery that they have not been trained on. We have grad workers carrying things that are too heavy. And there's an overall lack of knowledge regarding workers' compensation policies at the university. So out of the 18 schools, 17 of 18 have provisions for workplace health and safety. Intellectual property is another issue that we hear about when we're going around campus. So Pitt actually owns any of your intellectual property that you generate while you're at the university. But some other institutions have other arrangements and other policies allowing grads to own their intellectual property or having input into what those policies are. This is something that we could actually bargain for in our agreement. And I think that's it. Those are the main issues that we hear when we go around campus. And as you can see, I think actually having the power to engage in collective bargaining would really help us achieve major changes in the issues that are facing grads around campus.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. I'm going to share the story of how I got to be involved with the union and what the union, having a union means to me. So the story starts when I shifted to the US from India a little over a year ago. So I attended the various orientation events at the university level and also at the Graduate School of Public Health. And at none of these events, I thought that there were student bodies which represent the interests of graduate student workers to the university administration. This left me a bit surprised that such a large university doesn't have a mechanism for the interests of grad workers to be addressed by the university administration or a pathway where we could put our grievances to the university administration. So I was thinking, why is this so? And this question just stuck with me. And it was this point that I came in contact with some of the organizers from the Graduate Student Organizing Committee. And I was like, well, this is something that I should definitely be involved with. But like many other international students or any other international student, I was a bit worried. If I do get involved in any way with the organizing campaign, what would that mean to my visa status? What would it mean for my funding? And what would the faculty in the department think of me? So I was not really sure if I should get involved with the organizing efforts. But then the political situation in this country changed, and at that point I took a decision that graduate workers, especially international graduate workers, should have their rights protected, and it is only through collective bargaining that this can be achieved. So I went ahead, Ben Case, who's the organizer from the Department of Sociology, I just ran into him when he was campaigning in front of the Cathedral of Learning, and I said, well, listen, I'm from the Graduate School of Public Health and I want to be involved with this. And he was like, welcome aboard, and that's when my involvement started. So to be honest, my working conditions are pretty good right now. So why is that I'm with the organizing committee, or why is that I'm at this webinar even? That is because I keep wondering, what if my conditions change? Beth and Sarah refer to what are issues that students, different graduate student workers are facing. If I end up in such a situation, who would be there for me? And for me, the answer was the graduate student union, because the body, which is we constituted only of graduate student workers, which means that it is us who would then be there to protect my rights and be there for me in case I am facing any issue with the university administration or even within the school, Graduate School of Public Health. And also, many of us come from different cultures, many of us come from different countries. And in each culture, in each country, unions have a different connotation, some positive, some negative, and some of us might even think, what I'm going to be here for 4 or 5 years, what is that I'm going to achieve by being a part of the union? But I do think that higher education is a place where we evolve, where we develop critical thinking. And being a part of the organizing committee, I have met with students from different countries, from different cultures, and I've learned so much more than by just being in the Graduate School of Public Health. So if not for anything else, if you already think, well, my working conditions are pretty great, my faculty is great, what else can I achieve, or how else can I benefit from being a part of the union? I think it is being exposed to this diversity and being exposed to a situation or to a place where you can express your opinions without fear of any retaliation, and being part of an effort that is built towards social justice. And also if you think of it, the university has the Graduate School of Public Health, it has the School of Social Work, and the values of these schools are towards promoting social justice. And if not within the school, where else can we practice and be part of efforts towards achieving our rights and protecting our rights. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks. So I just wanted to lay out some of the basics of the process just to make sure all of that sort of legalistic stuff is clear. First though, just a definition to make sure we're all on the same page. A union is a democratic organization of workers that use collective action and collective bargaining to improve their workplace, their lives, and their community. So the most important thing about that is that a union is a democratic organization of you guys. It's not a situation in which you're hiring an outside entity or paying a fee for a service. It's not like hiring a lawyer or getting insurance or something. It's not a situation, in other words, in which a USW staff person like me is going to be coming in and telling you guys you must do X, Y, Z. So you're going to have a democratic organization. You guys decide what you do. That's how we operate. So that's a crucial thing to remember, I think, throughout this conversation. And as you think through the pros and cons and sort of weigh the things that you're hearing from various people, it's crucial to remember that the union is not a third-party entity. You guys are the union as soon as you form one. So let me just explain the process, since there's a sort of legal set of mechanisms in the United States to bring collective bargaining into being. So the first step is a group of workers get together and decide they want to change something about their workplace, or that they want to find a way to preserve the things they like about their workplace, prevent them from being unilaterally changed by their employer. The first sort of step they have to take is to have their co-workers sign authorization cards. That's these things which some of you have probably seen. The authorization card is a document that indicates that you want a union. Once at least 30% of the prospective bargaining unit has signed those cards, then the union can petition the labor board to conduct an election. The labor board in this case is a state agency. In the public sector in the United States, labor relations laws happen at the state level. In the private sector, there are federal laws. So this is a state agency in our case. And that state agency guarantees the confidentiality of the cards. You give them to the union gives them to the agency, and that agency will not disclose to your employer who signed and who didn't sign a card. And assuming that at least 30% of the cards, or at least 30% of the unit rather, sign cards, those are submitted to the labor board, then the labor board conducts an election. Usually this involves on-campus balloting, probably in multiple locations. We have to sort of work out the details after we petition, but that's normally how it's set up. In order for the election to be a win for the union, 50% plus 1, that is a simple majority, of the votes have to be in favor of the union. Assuming that 50% plus 1 are in favor, at that point the labor board will require the employer to recognize the union and to bargain a contract in good faith. Our next step at that point is we'll help you guys elect a representative bargaining committee to make sure that all the different schools and different disciplines are represented on the committee of people that's going to actually bargain the contract with the administration. The USW will supply you with experienced negotiators and legal staff and research support and all of that stuff, but it's people that you elect from your own ranks who will actually be at the table with the administration and bargaining your contract with the assistance from us. The first task of the bargaining committee is to survey the membership. We usually recommend something like an online survey so you can extract quantitative data with a pretty large data set, but also we usually encourage lots of meetings in departments, focus groups, whatever mechanism you guys are comfortable using, but some way that you can have a real back and forth and get rich qualitative details about what people's concerns are, what things they want to see changed, what things they don't want to see changed, and what the real priorities are. The bargaining committee will then take all that information and use that to guide the proposals they make to the administration. The bargaining process usually involves the two sides making proposals and having discussions about the rationale for what each side is proposing, and in the course of that conversation, arriving at some kind of agreement that both sides can live with. Once your bargaining committee has reached a tentative agreement with the administration, at that point they'll bring it back to you guys and you'll have a vote on whether or not to ratify the contract. The contract doesn't go into effect until you vote for ratification. If you vote to ratify a contract, then at that point you would elect officers and set up the mechanisms of your democratic union, which is to say you'd arrange for regular meetings. You're required by our Constitution to meet at least monthly, and that's because the real power of the union resides ultimately in the general membership, and sovereignty in every local, and indeed in the union as a whole, rests with the rank and file. So we encourage regular meetings so that everyone can be fully engaged. And so you'll set up that structure once you ratify a contract, and that's what you use to communicate with one another, to collaborate, to support one another, and to enforce the contract once it's in place. So that's just an overview of the process, but of course if people have specific questions about nuances of it, we're happy to illuminate those as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Robin, and thank you to everyone on our panel. And I think at this point we are going to go ahead and take some questions. We're going to take questions from email, Twitter, and Facebook. So if you have not asked a question and you have a burning one, please feel free. You can tweet us at PittGrads or with the hashtag AskAGrad. And if you're watching this on Facebook, you know how to ask a question on Facebook. So the first question is an email question, and I'm just going to read it out. The question is, I'm happy with my situation at Pitt. What benefit will a union have for the departments where things are good?
So I'll take that one. I would say that, so where things are good, why unionize? I mean, the short answer is to protect what we already have, right? So we live in an age of austerity. We're being threatened with state budget cuts, and so a union will help us, keep the things that we already have in place that are good, and make sure that they're there for us and the grad workers that are coming up after us.
Thank you, Sarah. I have another email question. I'm concerned that a union will lower my wages in order to raise wages in other departments. How do we prevent this from happening?
Maybe since that's a process question, I'll pick that one up. So as I said a little bit ago, the bargaining committee is going to be something you elect from your own ranks and set it up in such a way that it's representative of the different programs. And normally the way bargaining committees operate, in my experience, is that they make decisions by consensus. If you have 600 people in a room, consensus decision making is a little tough to make fly, but if you've got 10 or 12 people in a room, you can do it. And the goal of the bargaining committee is normally to find a way to balance everybody's interests and to come up with something that the entire membership would benefit from. And circumstances in which there are actual conflicts between segments of the membership, sort of rarer than you would think they would be, but when those arise, usually you just look for a creative solution. So I'll give you one example from my own experience. We bargained a contract for the adjunct faculty at Robert Morris University, a little university just outside of town here in Pittsburgh. And one of the things that the whole membership was interested in was a seniority system for course assignments. The difficulty was that the people who were more senior especially wanted to increase their course loads through this seniority system. But if the senior people all increase their course loads, then the junior people would be out of a job because there's sort of a fixed number of courses to go around. So what sort of bargaining committee came up with on that was to construct a system that first preserved everybody's existing course loads, so it sort of preserved the status quo. And because when we looked at the numbers, there's pretty significant turnover from year to year, over time there would be extra courses, and then those extra courses would be assigned to the more senior faculty on a seniority basis. So basically over time, the senior folks would get what they want because their course loads would go up, but in the immediate term, the more junior people wouldn't be out on the street, they'd be able to maintain their existing loads, and of course they would also accrue seniority over time. So it's in the sort of practical business of bargaining, that's what you try and do, is try and craft a solution that you can get the employer on board with and that satisfies the interests of your members. One difference in this particular example is that when you're talking about the number of courses on offer, that's a pretty fixed quantity. I mean, enrollments maybe go up slightly and program enrollments vary and so on, but it's more fixed than wages. One thing to bear in mind just financially is that Pitt's an enormous institution with, sort of bags of money a mile high. The sort of total cost of all graduate student stipends together, somewhere on the order of 2% of the operating budget. And bear in mind that graduate student workers are about a quarter of the research and instructional personnel of the university. So 2% is pretty small. Even if you got, a wage increase that nobody's ever gotten, you doubled your wages, got 100%, it would go up to 4%. So in absolute numbers, it seems like it's a lot of money. A current total cost is probably somewhere around $50 million, but that's $50 million inside of a, $2.1 billion budget. So it's not a situation where Pitt is a cash-strapped institution, like a tiny, struggling community college or something like that. This is a situation in which there's a lot of room to move. And usually the result of unionization is just that the administration has an incentive to allocate their resources more efficiently than they do now.
Thanks, Robin. I have another email question. We have a lot of email questions. It's a pretty simple one. Will having a union affect my relationship with my advisor?
So I'll take that one too. So it will, and there actually have been studies showing that it'll improve that relationship. So if you think about it, if advisors are free to focus on the mentoring that they have to do and the advising that they have to do, and they don't have to worry about these economic issues, then the relationship will actually improve. So the study actually found that grad students found that advisors were able to provide them with better support, and they had more academic freedom and higher pay when they were unionized. So the short answer is yes, it will affect the relationship and it will improve it, and it's been studied by actually the Industrial and Labor Relations School at Cornell University, so reputable.
Can I just add something to that? I mean, I think I notice, I'm sure you notice this too, Sarah and Rahul, that during our PhD programs, we're not trained how to be managers of employees, right?
Yeah.
So I think it also lets our mentors off the hook a bit, where they don't have to worry about some of this, sort of minutia that they were never trained how to do, and it really frees them up to focus on the science. It frees you up to focus on the science or the teaching and your dissertation writing.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Another email question. What benefits can a union provide for international students? Can we, presumably this means, can international students join the union too? And will there be any retaliation if international students support the union?
Yeah, so I'll get that. So international students can become a part of the union, and that is protected by the law. So the university administration cannot discriminate against anyone for being part of the union. However, we cannot guarantee that the university won't retaliate, but if that does happen, we know that the legal team at United Steelworkers would be there to protect our rights. I think the other part of the question was about what benefits can we expect. So the union is it would be what we would want out of the union, but I could give examples of what student workers at other universities have achieved. So some of it was refunds of the service fee, which is I think around depending on which I think it's around $350 if I'm not wrong about the number. So students have got a refund of that, and some universities, the students actually get time off so that they can go to their particular consulates and take part in elections which relate to the countries which they belong to. So it would depend on what we want, and then I think it is definitely possible that we can achieve better protection of our rights than already what we have.
Thank you, Rahul. And I'm sorry if I missed this. Can you tell me what the service fee is for those of us who don't
So the service fee is about, I think it's the international students have to pay this when you're attending an university. Before I came here and before I could even go to the US consulate for my visa interview, I had to pay this particular fee. So some universities have this in place where the university would reimburse graduate employee when they because when they go there, it's like the university is employing the graduate workers, so it means that the university has to pay them for the thing, because if on any other job, it's the employer who pays the visa processing fee.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
We have a Twitter question that I'm excited about. So the Twitter question is, what can a union do about Pitt's poor mental health services?
Yeah, I'll take that because that's really something that I feel really strongly about. So I mentioned before that some of the issues that have occurred are not high enough levels of staffing. Some of you may be aware that several months ago there were several psychiatrists that left, and leaving only one psychiatrist to be there to handle all students, undergraduate and graduate students at the university. There are not enough counselors to go around when school is in session during the normal year. Things are a little different during the summer term, but when everyone is back in class, there is a very high need, especially when you figure that 47% of all grad students are depressed, and that we have 1.5 to 2.5 times the risk as other people do. So what we could do, if we were able to collectively bargain and have power in numbers, we can sort of lobby the university to make sure that they have enough staff, that the staff is well enough paid for the services that they're providing, that they attract really good staff and that they retain that staff. To offer more things like the University Counseling Center offers sort of group therapy sessions, they offer workshops and things like that, but there are never enough to go around. And so I've heard of people who have been trying to get into a dissertation writing support group for a very long time, and they can never get into it. So we could petition for the university to expand their offerings. Another thing that the university does is they basically limit you to 8 counseling sessions per academic year. So what that means is starting, let's say we actually started on September 1st, and then going all the way to the following end of August, you would be allowed 8 sessions with a counselor. If you need more, or you need something more frequently than once a week, they will refer you out to the community. So another thing that we could consider doing is saying, right now what happens is you get a referral, which may be nothing more than, you know, the Google Maps listing of the counselors that are closest to you, which really does you not a lot of good when you're in a state where you don't feel very good. So what we could do is ask for the counseling center to have existing relationships with counselors in the community, that we get sort of preferred status going there, and the counseling center has vetted them and knows that they're high quality and that take our insurance. Those are just a few of the ideas that we could actually achieve, but only if we have a seat at the table.
Thanks, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
So we just got a question on Facebook from Helen Ann. Would a union affect folks in the Pitt community who aren't grad student workers, like undergrads, grad students without a paid position, etc.?
Well, maybe just the sort of legalistic piece of that is that the only people who would be members of the union would be graduate students or employees of Pitt. So it's not like some kinds of membership organizations where you can sort of define membership however you like. It's a little bit more legally constrained than that. But certainly having graduate students be organized, as I mentioned before, it encourages the university to be a little bit more careful about how it allocates resources, and tends to sort of raise all boats as far as student life and transparency issues and things like that. Maybe other people have thoughts on that.
Do you mind repeating the question? Sorry, I was sort of looking at some of my writing. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the question is, would a union affect folks in the Pitt community who aren't grad student workers? For example, undergrads, graduate students who don't have like a paid position or who are on fellowship or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just to echo a little bit and extend what Robin was saying, I mean, I think that we have this amazing capability to affect the culture. So yeah, we could change campus, and we can make it exactly what we want. You know, I think the thing is, all of us are here doing this, like we're volunteering, you know, we're giving our time freely, and we're spending our work time on this. So it means something really important to us that we're giving up time that we could be working on our dissertation or like having a life outside of school, that, you know, that we're doing this. So we feel very strongly about it, and we're really committed, and we could, you know, make changes. I think something that's really important, you know, I have some friends, people I used to work with, who have college age, you know, undergraduate kids who are attending Pitt, and they don't have any idea that the people who are teaching their kids are paid so low that they would be eligible for government benefits like Medicaid, WIC, food stamps, and so on. If you have that conversation with them, they're really shocked. And so I think what you'll see is that the grads who are teaching the undergrads are going to be happier. They're going to have the right level of work to really give the right attention to their classes and to the students in their classes. And that's going to benefit those undergraduate students as well.
Thank you so much. This is maybe germane to what you were just saying, Beth. We have another email question. I don't make enough now to pay my bills. How much will the union cost me, and when do we start paying?
Maybe I'll take that one. So the dues rates in the USW, in order to be fair, are set for the entire international union, and so they're specified in the international constitution. Once you ratify your first contract and elect your officers, your local, like all the locals in the Steelworkers, will send delegates to an international constitutional convention every few years, and it's at that convention that any changes to the constitution are made, including setting the dues rate. Since it's the rank and file members who decide what the dues rate is, obviously there's not an incentive to inflate that rate unnecessarily. The current rate is 1.45% of your gross income as a graduate student worker, plus 2 cents an hour. So that works out to, depending on what your stipend rate is, somewhere on the order of $8 to $10 a week, something like that. So a few fancy Starbucks drinks, I guess. And of course, the goal will be that first contract will involve an increase in pay. And you know, certainly, my advice as an individual human would be if the contract doesn't give you a greater pay increase than you're paying in dues, you shouldn't ratify it. It's as simple as that. And the other first contracts for graduate students among this comparison class, I don't think any of them had a raise that was at or below their dues rate. It's always significantly more, and that's because all of you have been bargaining with your employer individually, so that it's each lonely human up against the entirety of the institutional might of the University of Pittsburgh. You have depressed wages. So, and since the university has a lot of resources, increasing your wages pretty significantly won't be very difficult. So as long as you're over 1.45% over the life of the agreement, then it's all net gain from there on out.
Thank you, Robin. We have another question from Facebook. Just came in from Rachel. She asks, today at the Career Symposium for Grads, the Vice Provost talked about how Pitt and other universities lack transparency, but didn't propose a mechanism to do this. Presumably that means to improve transparency. How can a union help to do this where the administration is failing?
I can get started, and anybody please jump in. So, you know, as I mentioned, it's so many things are unclear to us from where we sit. I have talked to many grad workers who have no idea that their contractually obligated work hours are 20. Their jaws are on the ground when you tell them that. In fact, a whole room of them started laughing when they were told that because, you know, so I was talking about time theft earlier. I mean, if you work 20 hours a week. I don't know. God bless you. That's amazing. Everybody I know is working 60, 80 hours a week. And so that's the first thing. People don't even know how many hours they're supposed to be working. That's very simple. Could we have something in writing, like a contract that actually comes to us that we have to look at, that lays out, what we're being paid, how many hours we have to work, what our benefits are, what holidays we have off, whether we get any vacation time, whether we get sick time. Just be, open about whether that's happening. In the departments, how are decisions that affect our daily lives, teaching course loads, how are those decided? And so we can very much have input into asking the administration to very clearly lay that out and to allow us to actually be part of the decision-making process.
Thank you, Beth.
Maybe I could just add one thing to that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why Pitt is abnormally opaque is that it's got an unusual legal status compared to other public institutions like Michigan or Berkeley or whatever. Pitt's a state-related school. It's not state-owned like the 14-campus state school system in Pennsylvania. Pitt, like Penn State and Temple, they all have this unusual status that's kind of a public-private hybrid. And as a result of that, Pitt, unlike normal public employers, does not have to respond with information to most public records requests. So in normal context, because as taxpayers we're funding Pitt, we have a right to know how they're spending our money. In the case of Pitt, we don't have that kind of access. Just to give you an example of the sort of lack of transparency, the Faculty Senate had asked the administration how many part-time faculty there are at Pitt. Shouldn't be a complicated thing, right? They've got a payroll system that's got everybody's job classification in it, so that you would think would not be a hard ask. But it took the administration, I believe it was 4 years to respond with an actual number. When the number came through, it turned out that every year Pitt has to report to the federal government how many part-time faculty there are, and every year they'd been saying a little over 800. Well, it turned out there were 2,100. So the lack of transparency is a serious issue because it doesn't allow us to understand what's going on in the institution. One of the ways in which a union helps with that is that in the process of collective bargaining, the employer is required to provide any information you need to understand their proposals or their rationales for the proposals at the table. So if they say, for example, well, we don't have enough money to pay for XYZ, then they have a legal obligation to provide you with the actual budget details that show they don't have enough money. And then you can, work with them to craft, proposals that are financially responsible. But that legal process then gives you access to information that otherwise you don't have any legal right to, and they don't seem inclined to spontaneously divulge.
I think you sort of jogged something in my mind as well that I just want to add. There's like a really amazing way that you could help us right now because, this lack of transparency is even a hindrance in us even trying to organize right now. So we are limited in, Pitt will not give us a list of who the grad workers are. We don't know where to find you unless, we do our own looking around. And, I know in my department where some people are, and I'm friends with a lot of those people and I can track them down. Many of you who are in locked labs or who, for whatever reason, don't like working on campus, we cannot find you. And so that is another way that this opaqueness is really just... it's not giving us an equal opportunity to put our information out to you for you to make an informed decision. So the way you can help us is by all of you talking to your colleagues. If you are in a department, talk to the people that you work with, talk to your friends, ask them if they know about the union, ask them to sign a card. You can go to our website, pittgradunion.org, and you can print a card out from there. You do need to actually print it out and fill it out because we actually need the signature, in ink, legally speaking. But there's every opportunity for you to actually really help us a lot to counter this opaqueness. So.
Great, thank you. We have another email question. Will the union force me to only work a certain number of hours?
I think I'll get that because we hear this a lot when, especially in the School of Health Sciences, where people especially work in labs. So as Beth was mentioning, many of you might be working more than 20 hours, or you might not be aware that 20 hours is what you are supposed to be working for each week. So now the question becomes, are you willingly doing the additional hours that you're putting in? So in case you're not, the union will have a system where you're protected from being forced to work more than the 20 hours. Other than that, I think a lot of other universities have tried to improve the conditions. So one of it is, which is the number of hours that you need to be working. However, as I mentioned earlier and as we have been discussing, the union is us. And Robin was mentioning about the contract, and it has to be ratified. It has to be ratified by all the graduate student employees. So in case you're not happy with what is mentioned, then you don't have to agree to it. So I think that gives you power to choose what you want to be in the contract and what you want to agree to as a part of the contract. So I think the union is us, and we can decide what we want out of it. And I don't think the union can in any way determine or decide for you the number of hours you need to work. But in case you're working more than you have to, you will have legal protection, which I think is essential.
Thank you, Rahul. I have another Twitter question. I'm sure that everyone here has seen the Me Too hashtag that was circulating on Twitter and on Facebook this week. So the Twitter question is, in the wake of the hashtag Me Too campaign, what can the union do for grad student workers regarding sexual harassment and discrimination on Pitt's campus?
I can speak to that because it's another issue in addition to mental health that I feel very, very strongly about. It really, really broke my heart. I don't know, I can't remember what day that hashtag started, but the night that it started, and then like the next morning, sort of waking up and just watching my feed fill up with essentially every woman that I know saying that. It's so pervasive. And I mentioned the law review article that found that 1 in 10 women at research universities has been harassed, but I think that number has to be higher. And I think when you, Robin, I don't know if you can speak to this in particular, when you do sort of these surveys that are anonymous and things, it's really a higher percentage, right? Like have you mentioned to me before around 25%? I think?
Yeah, so there's institutions use different kinds of survey instruments. One of the standard ones they use is called HERI, H-E-R-I.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what the acronym actually stands for, but you can Google it. But that is a series of questions about people's experiences of sexual harassment on campus, and they routinely find higher numbers than that. I think the nationwide average is something like 14% or 15%, so higher than 1 in 10. Some institutions that I've looked at had significantly higher, more like 25%. So.
Right, and sort of in the wake of Me Too, I was doing a little digging around, and I found an EEOC Equal Employment Opportunity Commission report from 2016 that was mentioning it's like 33 to 80-something% of women have been harassed in the workplace. So it's an even larger number. So all that to say, this is essentially an open secret in academic circles, that it's very, very common. As I mentioned, the majority of the harassment that comes people's way is physical and not what you would think. You would think it would be verbal or, in writing. It's not. It's physical, unwanted physical advances. And these the majority of cases, again, were serial harassers. So in the wake of that, first of all, we again will be a unified group that can change culture on campus. So we can start to change this culture of just thinking it's just part of the hazing process, or it's what people have to go through, and people keep it a secret, and people are ashamed. We can change culture and actually make it so that people are more willing to go through reporting mechanisms that are in place and get rid of serial offenders. I think there are other things that we can do as well with our collective action capabilities. We can try to encourage the university to actually put resources behind things that it says it believes in. So the chancellor has said that, you know, eradicating sexual harassment and assault from campus is his highest priority. I don't see that. I think that's something we need to change. The reason why I don't see that is because the Title IX office on campus is woefully understaffed. They have 3 people to cover Title IX complaints for, that's every faculty, staff, and undergraduates and graduate students. I don't know how 3 people address that issue. They don't go out into the community, the campus community, and hold events regularly where they explain the process of reporting. So it was news to me when I heard a presentation recently that indicated how we actually file a complaint and what the policies are that surround this. So they could start actually encouraging going into departments and work units, and this year, the first time they went to orientation events, so that's a good start, but they need to really expand that. In addition, they need to provide the space that the staff needs. So they need to have consistent private locations for the Title IX specialists to actually meet with people who are trying to report. And one thing that they could do is just, again, be more out in the departments, actually making themselves available and letting people in departments get to know them, letting grad workers see who they are and see that they can trust them, and actually explaining how reporting works. I think those are just some of the ways that we could influence the university about sexual harassment.
It's maybe also worth mentioning that a lot of graduate union contracts have very good language about discrimination.
Yeah.
And one of the things about having anti-discrimination or anti-sexual harassment language in your contract is that on top of you being able to file a complaint with the EEOC, which is a government agency, you can separately try and resolve the situation through the union's negotiated grievance procedure. And that means you've got sort of 2 different recourses, one sort of more internal to the university situation and one sort of external. But in the union's grievance procedure, you'd have a union representative with you at all times, you'd have legal advice, and you'd have a lot of backup and support. A lot of sexual harassment doesn't get reported and doesn't get prosecuted the way it should. And that's in part because people feel isolated and intimidated by the process. And it's one of those things where, as Beth was mentioning before, there's kind of perverse incentives, because the institution, rightly is trying to limit its liability. But for the institution, the easiest way to limit its liability in sexual harassment cases is for people not to report them, right? And that's not, in the long run, that's not a beneficial situation. Whereas the union's interest is yours, because you guys are the union, right? So you want your colleagues to not be sexually harassed. You don't want to be in that kind of environment. So you have a very strong incentive to defend your coworkers and to significantly improve the campus climate in that respect. And the sort of collective bargaining piece of it can be an important tool in doing that.
I think, Robin, can I ask you to sort of expand on, I know that USW has a lot of things to say about sort of protecting civil rights and includes it in its constitution and things like that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, so the USW Constitution, among other things, requires every local union in the entire international to have a devoted civil rights committee and a women's committee, which are charged with, in the case of the women's committee, focusing on issues that particularly women confront in the workplace, and in the civil rights committee, sort of any oppressed group or minority group in that workplace and in that community in general. So, and this is sort of reflective of the general way we do things, which is that we try and get the rank and file themselves engaged in the process of transformation, because I don't think you can change workplace culture top down. You've got to have people that are there figuring out what the appropriate solutions are and identifying the relevant problems and so on. But we also have policy statements that come out of those constitutional conventions where, you know, you guys and other locals send delegates and decide what the organization as a whole, what position it's going to take, you can find the statements from the last constitutional convention, which was earlier this year, online if you want to read them, and they're pretty forceful about civil rights issues, about women's rights, about LGBTQIA rights. All of those things, I think, you know, we have a very forceful position on, and our general point of view is that you know, in a society that's structured around a lot of economic injustice, that economic injustice is propped up by dividing people against each other in all kinds of different ways, pitting genders against one another, pitting races against one another, pitting, you know, urban versus rural, all that stuff. So, you know, we think that you can't really address the economic piece, economic inequality, injustice, and exploitation, without also addressing these civil rights issues. To us, that's all sort of different parts of the same battle. We don't think it's possible to defend workers without taking that stuff very, very seriously. So we have, you know, we normally bargain, you know, anti-discrimination language in all of our contracts, and put a lot of effort into making sure those things are properly enforced.
That's great, thank you. I know that you have touched on this a little bit already, Robin, but we have an email question that is a question that we get all the time, so I'm hoping that maybe you can touch on it again. The question is, how can the university afford a union?
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, the union by itself isn't a cost, right? You guys forming a union just means that the university has to bargain with you. So I guess the question, I think what the question is probably getting at is something like, you know, can the university pay higher wages than it currently pays? And a couple of things to bear in mind there. One is, again, you're a democratic organization. If you form a union, you're not going to tell your bargaining committee to put proposals on the table that would economically destroy the University of Pittsburgh, right? That's it's not in your interest to have like financially irresponsible decisions made. So you wouldn't have any incentive to propose, you know, financially destructive things. It's one of those things that, like, theoretically, I guess you could do it, but in practice it doesn't happen because it's sort of obviously contrary to your interests. And also, the negotiation process is bilateral. It's not a situation where, you know, you guys will be in a position to just dictate to the administration, this is what you're going to do. You know, neither side is legally obligated to agree to any particular proposal. It's a negotiation. You try and figure out something that both sides can live with. The administration is not going to agree to anything that's financially unsound. I'm sure if you ask them that, they will tell you that. So, you know, the concern that that unionization is going to result in some kind of financial harm to the university, I think just doesn't, just in practice, that's not what happens. And there's no evidence that it's happened in other universities, even in like the manufacturing sector, which has been extensively studied because economists often have this question, does unionization affect the likelihood of plant closure or capital flight or whatever? And even in that context, it's clear that unionization has no effect at all. It doesn't help you in a manufacturing context, but it doesn't hurt you either. It doesn't change the likelihood of plant closures. The economic forces that drive that are you know, operating on every firm pretty much equally and very, very powerfully, of course, in manufacturing. It's not particularly a concern in higher education because there's, the university is not going to ship campus overseas or something. You know what I mean? Like that's not the kind of situation we are in here. And the things you're going to bring to the table and the things the university are going to agree to are all going to be financially responsible things because it's all going to be adults in a room together figuring it out.
Thanks, Robin. And this is, the next question is another email question, and I think that this is maybe sort of germane to what you were talking about, and this is something that I hear all the time because I am a grad student in the sciences where we're all funded, most of us are funded through grants from the NIH or the NSF or a similar body. So the question is, how will this, I'm guessing that this means how would a union affect grants and how we fund our work?
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit because obviously by being in one of the schools of the health sciences, I'm pretty familiar with grants, and I too get this question a lot. So when you're laying out your process in writing your grant, planning it out, you have to write a budget. You have to write a budget justification. You have to plan. Do I need a research associate? Is that person a staff person? Do I have a grad worker on this? For how many years? Am I going to fund a postdoc on this? How many collaborators are on this, and what % of effort are we covering for them? So there's a very detailed process that PIs are going through when they lay out this grant. And so this actually makes it quite easy if we do something like, say, bargain for annual increases. Writing the budget becomes a very simple thing where if you're funding a grad worker on that grant, you know that this year it costs X amount of dollars, and next year it's going to cost 103.5% of that, and next year it's going to be another 4% increase, and so forth. So it lets you actually project what your costs are going to be and account for those in the planning process. So because that's how some people are funded in the health sciences, you build that into the cost of your grant. In addition, I would just say that, as I mentioned before, really, really top flight schools around the country have grad worker unions. And so, Berkeley and Irvine and Michigan have not sort of gone out of the science doing business, so they haven't been sunk in this endeavor because they have unions. They've obviously been very successful at getting NIH and NSF funds, and they attract the best students, and that hasn't stopped. And the people that come out of those universities are really seen as amazing scientists. So this isn't going to interfere with that. I'd like to also speak though, and maybe, Sarah, you can help me a little bit because it's sort of more your area, but I mean, this is also an issue in the arts and sciences. It's not, so the mechanism is a little bit different. It's not so much grant funding. And in these institutions, in these departments, it's really more like a hard money thing. Like it's the money of the department that's going to pay for you to be able to teach, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thing that you have to keep in mind is, I mean, Robin has mentioned this, and I'll just maybe add a little other piece of trivia just to round that out for you tonight, that, Pitt is very well off. They actually have a $3.6 billion endowment, making them, do you know offhand, 25th, 26th largest endowment of any university within the US. I mean, which is super shocking. So they have money to devote to the arts and sciences where the funding mechanism is different. I don't know, can you tell us a little bit more about how your funding works?
I mean, yeah, it comes from the department, just like you said, so I
Mhm.
don't have anything to add to that. But I mean, it's crazy when you think about Pitt's endowment, and also the fact that the people who do, I think, what's like some of the most valuable work for the institution, which is teaching the undergraduates, just to think about how much they're paid, right? So, I mean, in the humanities departments, it's adjunct faculty and grad students who are mostly responsible for undergraduate education, and to think about how much we get paid and how much money Pitt is sitting on is just, yeah, I mean, billions of dollars, and then what we get.
It's really frustrating. It's this, you were mentioning it earlier, it's sort of like this false, constriction. It's making you feel constrained about how much money the university has, but it's actually not true. It's like, De Beers, the diamond company, that they hoard all the diamonds in the world so that the price of diamonds will be so high. Like, that's sort of going on at Pitt. And, we can totally fund the English department. We can totally fund, philosophy of science. But we pretend that there's not money to fund them and that they're somehow not pulling their weight in the university.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely not true. We could fund people who are teaching our undergrads if we cared about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that too, just sort of specifically, I mean, fellowship programs could be much better funded. So, for example, Pitt started a public humanities fellowship this year, but they only funded a couple, I would say less than 5 fellows just for one summer. And I don't really see any good reason why they couldn't have been year-long fellowships. So most of the people that I know through that program, I actually got one of those fellowships, extended their work at the institutions they were working on, and were kind of just working there for free. I mean, the university could, it seems to me like they could easily fund for a year. Why not? I mean, public humanities fellows do good work in the community. So yeah, I second what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think people need to know that, in the arts and sciences, the way people are funded is a little bit different than in the health sciences. I guess in both circumstances, you may not have funding for the summer. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when the university, I think the university administration recently put out some figure, a grad worker who's making $27,000, and I think we all went on like this crazy hunt, like who is that? And that presumes that's like the annual salary, presuming that the person is a grad student researcher, which is the highest tier of pay generally, and that they're funded all 3 semesters essentially, and that's often not what happens, especially in the arts and sciences, where TAs and TFs are paid at a lower rate, and they may not, again, have work over the summer.
Yeah.
So I want to, and I think maybe Sarah, this could be a good question for you, because I think that you have, being in the humanities, you have sort of the most contact with undergraduates. We got a great question from our undergrad pals in YDSA, and they want to know what the undergrads can do to support our efforts on the grad student union. So obviously anyone feel free to chime in, but I know that like in the humanities you have much more contact with undergrads as part of your work.
Yeah, I guess just sort of one thing that I've already touched on, which is just to be aware of who's teaching you and what their working conditions are. What are our teaching conditions? How much are the people who are doing the most teaching getting paid for what they do? What is their course load? I mean, these are things that I think all Pitt undergrads and their parents who are paying tuition, the students who are going into debt, I mean, these are things that they need to think about. And also concretely, I mean, just to show support for our unionization effort, and also for the faculties, right? So show support by getting your student organization to endorse our campaign. And if you're not part of one, join one. So I know Students Against Sweatshops is a great organization on campus, working for economic justice and social justice. So yeah, I would say endorse us through your student organization, and if you're not part of one, join one, just get involved. So yeah.
And if you want a button, we've always got
Yeah.
tons of
Yeah, plenty of buttons.
And I think, it's very likely that you have friends who are grad workers at Pitt, so ask them if they know about the union efforts, and ask them to sign a card.
Yeah, that's great. So another question, and this is a question that I get pretty often. I'm from this region, so it's always like a little bit interesting. It's interesting how diverse the student body at Pitt is, and from all the different places that students come from. But for people who aren't from this region, they often ask like, why the Steelworkers, and like, will the Steelworkers show up and start telling me how to do my job? I'm paraphrasing a question.
Yeah, I can take that one. So I'll just talk a little bit about just having organized with the campaign. So we actually started organizing in 2015. Our campaign went public in 2016, so we've been organizing for a long time. And in the early days, it was just grad students with spreadsheets, just going around talking to people. And then we went looking for a union. We went looking for a union. And we did research on a whole bunch of them. We got in touch with representatives from them, and we chose the Steelworkers because their corporate headquarters are right downtown. So we can take a bus from campus downtown, and we are in touch face to face with organizers whenever we want. So they were by far the most responsive, offered us the most resources, and they're also organizing the faculty. So just that combination of all of that, their presence in the community, the ease of access that we had to them, all of that made the Steelworkers an obvious choice. So yeah.
If I could just add one thing to that, the name is in some ways a little misleading because we don't just represent people in the steel industry, and it's been that way actually for quite a long time. When the union was originally created in the late 30s, it was focused on organizing the steel sector, but pretty rapidly expanded to include, other parts of the steel supply chain, things that people were making with steel, other metals. We merged, I think, in the 40s with the aluminum workers, and pretty quickly diversified. As early as the 1950s, we were organizing nurses and other white-collar workers. So if you actually, like the actual legal name of the union, United Steelworkers is kind of the short version. The actual legal name is, I think I can get it right, United Steel, Paper and Forestry, Rubber, Manufacturing, Energy, Allied Industrial and Service Workers International Union, AFL-CIO, CLC. It's a big old mouthful, and that last bit's kind of like union jargon for etc. We represent an enormous array of different people, so much so that in, I think it was 2004, it sort of got to the point where we said, well, look, not even a majority of our members are in the steel sector, maybe we should change the name. So, there were surveys out to the membership, and people discussed it in their locals, and we had various possibilities, and people voted on them and all this stuff. And it turned out that overwhelmingly people just loved the name United Steelworkers. I think the leadership wanted something a little more general or a little more all-encompassing, but I think people like they're attached to the history, especially in this region, and in places like Chicago and so on, where there's a lot of history in the 30s, or Hamilton, Ontario. And also I think it sounds tough, people dig it, so yeah, don't be misled by the names.
Well, and I think, the United Steelworkers have been organizing in the academic sector since the 90s, the late 90s, right? Yeah. So it's an area where they have a great knowledge and great experience, and even locally as well, so.
Great, thank you. So we have another email question. If the administration retaliated against union supporters, will the union defend me? I think the question asker is insinuating that they themselves are a union supporter in that question.
The answer to that is absolutely. As was mentioned, our international headquarters are right downtown. We have an entire department full of lawyers that do nothing but this kind of thing. So we will certainly legally defend anybody who suffers retaliation for union activity. It's unlawful to retaliate against you in any form, for whether you're pro or against. You have a right under the law to choose to form a union or not to form a union. And that right is legally protected, and our attorneys will certainly make sure to enforce it. You also have a right to do that, to exercise your rights without any interference. So it's unlawful to have like a supervisor or a PI or somebody interrogating you about whether you support the union. That's illegal. Surveillance, if you can't have somebody standing around where you're having a union conversation, a supervisor or a PI or something, and sort of listening in, that's illegal. So there's pretty extensive legal protections, and the administration has advised faculty and department chairs in some detail that they're also not supposed to engage in retaliatory activity. So we don't anticipate it, but certainly if anything like that should arise, let us know, and we'll have your back.
I just want to add to that. So I was recently looking at issues of international students being a part of the union, and at few of the universities the administration was trying to spread misinformation saying that students' visa status is linked to them being a part of the union, which is of course untrue. So even if you're on an F1 visa, which is like most of us are, like on a student visa, you can still be part of a union and there can be no retaliation for that.
And I'd just like to put a fine point on something that was said earlier. Robin mentioned earlier the process of how the card collection happens, and that those cards are then shared with the PA Labor Relations Board, and at no time are they ever shared with the administration. No one on campus would ever have any way of knowing that you signed a card of support. So we know, we encounter people frequently who are concerned about, if they sign a card, will their PI find out and retaliate against them, various, scenarios like that. And so I just encourage all of you that if you think that, coming together in union with your fellow grad workers to protect what we already have and to influence what we could have together, if you think that's an important thing, but you're worried about somebody finding out, sign the card, give it to one of us. You can contact us again at pittgradunion.org and schedule like a one-on-one meeting. We will come pick up that card. And don't tell anybody else on campus. No one ever needs to know that you are a supporter or pro. So that is the safest thing to do if you have any concern. The administration will not know.
Thank you so much. We are almost out of time, and I know that most of us are academics and hate it when class goes over. So I'm going to just ask one more of our questions, and then we can wrap up. The last question, I actually don't know the provenance of this question. I don't know if it's email, Twitter, or Facebook. But the question is, have there been any improvements already because of the grad union effort at Pitt?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So there have been a lot of improvements. One of them is what Raul already mentioned. So the grad student body, just the relationships that have formed across departments, it's been really inspiring to see that. So there's much more solidarity. I got here in 2011, and it's just a world of difference. I think that's huge. And also directly in response to our organizing effort, the administration is suddenly paying attention to grad student workers and our issues, right? So over these past 2 years, they appointed an ombudsperson in arts and sciences. They appointed somebody, I think it's called a vice provost for grad student affairs. They are sending us surveys, trying to assess like what our conditions are, what our issues are. So yeah, I mean, not that any of those things would substitute for the way, for a union and the fact that we can advocate for ourselves, and we're in better position to advocate for ourselves, and in genuine position to do that. But I mean, we've already seen the changes that have been made. So yeah, solidarity and various appointments and trying to find out information. I mean, those are all our victories. So yeah, a lot's changed already.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. And I think with that, we are just about ready to wrap up, unless we have like 5 or 6 minutes.
Final comment.
Yeah, in case anyone has like a final comment or anything to offer. It's optional, you don't have to offer.
I actually, as you might imagine, I actually do. I just love to tell this fish story lately, so I have to tell it one more time and then retire it and never tell it again. This will be the third telling of the fish story. So you have to close your eyes and imagine, some aqua, tropical water, some palm trees. Think about the island vacation that you would love to be taking. And there are these two fishermen that are out in a boat, and you know, they're just really enjoying the day. It's so sunny and sky's blue. And they look down in the water and they see two fish in the water and they say, "Hey guys, how's the water?" And the fish are like, "Huh? What's water?" So the point is, they're steeped in the water. They just live in the water. They can't even see it. They don't know what it is. They take it for granted. And I think we're steeped in this academic culture, and we're steeped in like, this is the way it's always been. We take it for granted. We never fathom that we could change it. Holy cow, you mean like we could take charge of our situation and actually make things better for ourselves? Oh, that's like waking up in the Matrix, right? So I think it's really interesting because our pins, they have our motto on them and they say, there's a better way. That's our motto. So we need to realize that, you know, this is our water and we're waking up and we're seeing that there's a better way, and it is by forming a union. And so we need you all to contribute to that effort. I'll say it one more time. I guess I'm working in like threes tonight. pittgradunion.org. We need you to go there. And there's a way to, again, print and fill out and sign an authorization card. There's also a way on that website to schedule a one-on-one meeting with us if you have additional questions, or get in touch with us if you'd like us to do a panel in your department. But really, we need you to talk to your colleagues, and we need you to sign a card and contact us. We'll come pick it up directly from you so you don't have to do any work. But that would be the greatest work that you could do right now.
All right, well, thank you so much to Beth and to all of our other panelists. We did have some questions that we didn't get to, so we will answer those on Facebook and Twitter. So stay tuned to see those exciting answers to those other questions. And thank you all so much for talking with us, for sharing with us so late at night. And I guess that's it.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you,
hosting.
Abby.